Good afternoon. Welcome to our fourth talk of the day. It's a very popular talk. I'm Jamie McCall. I'll be chairing the talks today. I'm from PLB, who sponsor the show and are involved in the design and interpretation talks. We've got over 30 years of experience in the sector, and we're really pleased to be working on this, and we'd welcome any feedback on the talks to the Museum and Heritage Association, to the Museum and Heritage Show at info@museumandheritage.com. We'll have some time for questions at the end of the session, and we'll pass a microphone around so we can hear them. Please remember this session's being recorded, so you can access that. That'll be available after the show. There's also been passing some example questionnaires around. They'll be available for download too following the show. So to introduce you, this is the Museum Exhibition User Experience, collecting, analysing and using meaningful visitor data. If I can introduce the team from Oxford Museum of Natural History, we've got Ellie King, Doctoral Researcher and Exhibition Officer, and Natasha Smith, the Exhibition Officer. Okay?
Great. Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Is that all right? Perfect. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for coming along today for our presentation on Museum Exhibition User Experience. So we're going to be talking about evaluation methods which have been developed during Ellie's doctoral research and that we've been using to evaluate displays and exhibitions at the museum. And we've also been using this framework to develop and inform future exhibitions as well. So today we're going to be going through the framework that's kind of underpinning this, about how to collect data, what data and evaluation results look like, and how we can use these in future developments as well.
Yeah, and just to say, you may have a handout. If you've got the survey one, do not fill it in. Sadly, it's not feedback for us. This is the survey that we use in the museum, so just to let you know that. So all of this kind of starts with a theory and kind of idea that comes from another sector called user experience. And this has been used for creating some of the world's best products, so things like the iPhone. So Apple use this framework. And essentially, it's all about kind of understanding and creating meaningful products that are integrated into users' actual lives. And essentially, the kind of key thing about the model is that from the designer's perspective, we can only ever intend for a product to do a certain thing or be or received in a certain way. And then from the user perspective, there's no guarantee that what the designer intended will actually happen, and that is due to kind of the situation that the user comes in and uses the product. So for instance, their mood that day, I don't know if everyone's ever tried to use a phone while they're angry or things like that, and that all really depends and then creates those final actual consequences of what actually happens when they use the product. So taking that, we've kind of applied this to kind of museum learning and museum exhibits. And this is all about the people who come and look at exhibits and interact with exhibitions, so those kind of visitors that we've got. So this framework was developed by me. It's through interviews and surveys with museum professionals across the UK and with some of the visitors to Oxford during October 2020, and a paper on this and all the development side is currently in press with a journal, which is really exciting. And essentially what we get from the museum perspective is the start of that exhibition features. So that's kind of like the things you put into the exhibition. So your objects, your interpretation, your design, your lighting, your spacing, the interactives that you use in. One word which might be a little bit unfamiliar there is functionality, and that's something that's come directly from user experience, and that's all about the kind of mechanisms and the behind-the-scene things of how those products work. So in terms of exhibitions, it's things like making sure that your digital interactives actually work, the video plays, the text is the right size and height for people, all things like that. And we kind of say that good functionality is hidden functionality, but that when it's really bad, it's really noticeable for visitors. This then comes together into the intended exhibition character, and this is all about, these are split up into pragmatic qualities, which are essentially about the effectiveness of the exhibition in getting its message across. So are you getting those key learning outcomes across? And then it's split into hedonic qualities, which are all about the visitor experience of kind of receiving and engaging in those messages. And those two can be different things. And then it goes into, for the museum perspective, the aims of what you want to get out of your exhibition. And we split those into visitors to know, so that's kind of your learning outcomes, visitors to feel, so that's all about how we want visitors to feel and experience the exhibition, and then visitors to do, so that's the action that we want them to take. And that can be a spectrum from anything from reflection to discussion with their friends to going to learn more about it, all the way up to kind of changing their behaviour and doing something differently. Then it comes down to the visitor perspective, where we've got the same kind of starting point, but it's really important to note that that exhibition character is mediated by the visitor's kind of situation and what they're coming into the exhibition with. So that's things like their gender, their age, their prior background, their prior experiences, all these things that we think about our visitors. That really affects how they receive those characters and how they perceive the exhibition to be. So if a person is really into a topic and we've kind of put it at a certain learning level, they may find it a bit more boring than someone who has less knowledge of the topic and coming into it, and they might perceive it as really interesting. So there's differences there, and there's no actual guarantee that what we present to visitors, they're going to perceive in exactly the same way as we intended. So then it's mediated by those factors and by like why they visited the museum in the first place and things. And then it goes to those actual visitor gains, which are again split into that visitors to know, visitors to feel, and visitors to do. So that's kind of the model that all this is based on.
Great. So we're going to be talking about the exhibition, about the evaluation framework today within the context of one of our most recent exhibitions called Meet the Future. So Meet the Future opened in May last year, and it's running up until June, so it's only got a couple of weeks left. And it is part of our Contemporary Science and Society exhibition series. So really the key aim of that exhibition series is about public engagement with research. So for this exhibition, we partnered with a research group from Oxford University called LEAP, so that stands for Livestock, Environment and People. And LEAP aimed to understand the health, the environmental, social and economic effects of meat and dairy consumption and production. So we work with LEAP to really develop the exhibition, pull out those key messages and pull out the narrative of the exhibition. And essentially the key messages, we put them up on the screen here, that we kind of landed on, are that our current levels of meat consumption are unsustainable, that livestock farming is a leading cause of environmental degradation and a contributor to global warming, that levels of meat consumption vary between countries, and that the food system is interconnected and global. And I'm just going to give you a kind of really brief run through of the exhibition, just to give you a bit of context for the evaluation results that we're about to go through. So we start the exhibition by looking at kind of introducing people to current levels of meat consumption and how that varies between countries. So the fact that across the world, 90% of people are meat eaters, and that's still rising. You can see on the screen this kind of stacks of burgers. So we kind of try to show visually these the increase of meat consumption in different countries and how it varies across different countries. So the stack on the left is meat consumption in the 1960s, and the stack on the right is meat consumption in 2013. So showing that difference between countries. We then move on to looking at the history of the farming industry, how it's built up into the global industry it is today, and also introducing the idea that 40% of total land area is currently dedicated to agriculture, and that provides livelihoods for millions of people as well. We then move into looking at the environmental impacts, so for example, loss of biodiversity, deforestation, greenhouse gases, and then start looking at consumer choices. So for the consumer choices section, next slide, that's right,
sorry.
thank you. So for consumer choices, we actually used a project which LEAP are working on at the moment called eco-labelling, which kind of rates food according to its positive or negative influences on the environment, and it's about making this information available at the point of purchase for consumers. And we also had an interactive called How Green is Your Shop? So it's really about kind of pulling out those connections and the relevance of everyday lives and people's shopping habits. We then move on to looking at the health impacts of meat consumption and production. So what is a healthy diet, whether there are health risks involved in a meat-heavy diet, and how else we can get the nutrients that we need. And then in the last section, we kind of wrap up by looking at the future of food. So how reducing meat consumption could lead to healthier lives, how it could reduce our impact on the environment, and we look at alternative food sources as well. So for example, insects, lab-grown meat, plant-based foods as well, and look at how the future might be paved. So might it be government-led, might it be industry-led, might it be people-led, looking at all these different scenarios and possible alternatives for the future. So hopefully that's kind of just given you a bit of a brief overview of what the exhibition is and kind of what we were trying to achieve. It's obviously a very contemporary subject. There's a lot of discussion around it, and it's very personal to people as well. So we thought it was really perfect for using this evaluation framework on.
So on to the actual evaluation that we look at. So some of you should have the handout, which is the evaluation survey that we actually use. But if you don't have it, it will be available to download online. But essentially, the handout is a double-sided A4 survey, which takes around 3 to 5 minutes to complete. So it's absolutely not strenuous on the visitor at all. And what we do at the start is just collect some kind of basic visitor details. And then we head in to looking at the exhibition or exhibit that visitors have looked at. And the first thing that they do is select an emotion about how they feel about the exhibition. So what's the strongest emotion? And that comes from a kind of 21 standardized emotion wheel that's developed by psychologists and things. And then on the back, we have these things called word pair semantic differential scales. And these are two words that are opposing with each other, but are related to kind of qualities of an exhibition, which were developed with Oxford Museum staff. So it's 25 pairs, and they cover a variety of qualities. They're on a 7-point scale, which means if a visitor ticks towards the outside, they're indicating a kind of stronger feeling towards those words, or if they're ticking towards the middle, it's a bit more indifferent. And then finally, there's the 8 outcome statements at the bottom, are things like understanding, whether they feel they've learned something, their enjoyment, etc. And that's just rated on a simple kind of 5-point Likert scale. And then there's a little extra element of it for 10% of those visitors who were surveyed, and they have a slightly longer evaluation survey with a comment box, and they have a little interview with the surveyor, who was me at this point, and that's all about picking out the features of the exhibition that kind of influenced them into rating things the way that they did. So if they felt it was really interesting, we'd kind of ask them, okay, what particular bits did you pick out that really influenced you for that decision? And the kind of key thing that we think is really important about this survey is that it's a short survey, it's relatively short, but it does produce such a wealth of data. And it's all about understanding the perceptions from the visitor perspective of the exhibition. And it means we can look at the mechanisms of the outcome. So we can look at what features of the exhibition influence the kind of perceptions of the quality that they have, and then that leads into the kind of outcome. So you can already see how it's starting to pin together what we put in at one end as a museum to what our visitors get out of it at the other end.
So in terms of our evaluation of Meet the Future, so we did about 6 days of evaluation, and that resulted in 242 surveys and 22 interviews. And we're going to kind of talk through the evaluation results now and show you how they map onto that framework we showed you at the beginning. So firstly, visitor information. So this is information we gathered in the survey. And this information really helps us to understand those affecting factors that Ellie was talking about earlier. So how people how they kind of influence people's perception of the exhibition and their experience. So for Meet the Future, in terms of gender, it was a largely female audience, as you can see on the screen. So 64% of those surveyed were female. In terms of age, it mainly appealed to a young adult audience, usually coming in groups or couples, but there was also a significant family audience, which is quite normal for our audience at the museum. People that visited museums between 1 to 3 times in the last year were the largest group of visitors, and their motivations for visiting were that they wanted a good day out, to see something new, and they wanted to learn something.
So the next bit of data we look at are those word pair scales, and these are calculated through simple kind of means. And looking at here, we can kind of pick out the key perceptions and key qualities of the exhibition. So thinking back in terms of our key aims of it being a really informative, evidence-based exhibition, we can see that people have picked out here that it's really interesting and relevant and clear. So it's really, really strong on those getting those messages across, but slightly less kind of enticing and stimulating and those more experiential factors. So it's really information-led on this. You can see that on the scale for this is 4 to 7. So all of the results are more on the positive side, so towards more those top words that we've described. But I think what's really useful about this method is that even though there is that visitor bias that you get with kind of positive bias for surveying, we can still pick out the nuances of it. So even though it's all on that above side, that higher side, you can still distinguish what the key features are. And we also think it's fairly accurate. So one of the things we did, so we opened this exhibition in 2021, and we all know what was happening then. So we made sure that we allowed for social distancing. We had a quite open space, as much as we could in our narrow exhibition space, with kind of less interactives as we probably normally would have. And you can see that visitors have kind of rated it towards the kind of flat and rigid side of those things. So they are really picking up on the fact that it is a little bit less dynamic than what we would usually do. So we think that's a really good kind of indication of how useful this method is in really picking out those kind of qualities of the exhibition.
So in the kind of follow-up interviews, we'd ask people to unpick those choices that they'd made there a bit further. So for example, if they'd picked a particular emotion, we'd ask them why they felt like that and to talk about what features in the exhibition supported that perception. So as a result, you can really start to draw that link between the exhibition features and how these influence the visitor's perception of the topic and of the exhibition. The chart that you can see on the screen here is the number of times that visitors made a comment about a specific exhibition feature. And that kind of meat consumption chart that I was talking about earlier, you can see that's coming out top. But overall, this kind of way of working gives us a real insight into the exhibition. So for example, when visitors said that the exhibition is impactful and relevant, they picked out the strong visuals and informative data as supporting those perceptions. Similarly, when visitors felt that they'd learned something and when they felt informed, they said it was the facts and the statistics and the science that was being presented that provided an explanation to why they felt like that. So it's really about making those links between particular exhibition features and their perception of the exhibition.
So then we move on to the kind of outcomes, so that last piece of the puzzle. And again, you can see there's a slight higher focus on learning and understanding, so people saying they felt they've enjoyed and understood the topic, felt they've learned something, but a slightly less focus on it, kind of enjoyment, and that might be pretty natural for a topic like this, where it's probably not the most cheery topic to look at and things. So we can kind of see how the visitor experience is working in that sense. Key for us in this topic was promoting and supporting change of behaviour in terms of informing visitors to make their own decisions, and we can see that it looks like it's the lowest, and it is the lowest, but we do think that people stating that they want to change their behaviour as a result of the exhibition, and that 59% of visitors actually said that was quite a powerful thing for us. So that's one of the kind of key things that we found about this exhibition. So we can see here we've got the kind of features, we've got the character, and now we've got the outcomes.
And these survey methods also allow us to do some quite sophisticated analysis as well. That helps us to understand the mechanisms of the visitor experience of the exhibition. So from the demographic data that we collected, we can assess whether the visitor identity or motivation had a significant impact on how visitors perceive the exhibition and what their outcomes were. So did visitor identity and motivations impact on the ratings that they gave? And we got some really interesting results here concerning kind of gender, age group and emotional response. So we put a couple of them up on the screen for you here. So firstly, female visitors rated the exhibition consistently higher than their male counterparts. Visitors of all ages felt they could engage with the exhibition, so that actually wasn't an influencing factor. Someone's age didn't make a difference in terms of how they rated the exhibition. And thirdly, visitors who said they felt guilty were much more likely to want to change their behaviour as a result of visiting the exhibition. So really interesting stat there.
And then kind of one of the final pieces of evaluation we look at is kind of correlations, and I won't bore you with all the kind of stats about it, but this is essentially like understanding those mechanisms of what qualities influence the visitor outcome most, and what the mechanisms of this visitor experience is actually working, rather than just whether they kind of liked it or not. So the results show that the higher they rated an exhibition quality, the higher they also rated a particular outcome. So we've got a few examples here. So on the kind of final scale that we ask as kind of an overall judgment of the exhibition, so how good it is, we found that there were stronger correlations with more experiential factors. So people found it stimulating, they found it inspiring, and they found it impactful. So it's really those experiential qualities were influencing that overall judgment. But then similarly, I think it was really interesting that people who said that the exhibition was good overall and rated that highly, they also rated the outcomes of people enjoying themselves, saying they learned something and saying that they felt it was a good use of time well. And I think that's really interesting because that really like speaks to what kind of informal museum learning really is and what the core of it is. So it's really interesting that the stats have kind of picked that out. And then in terms of kind of a different take on this, the outcome of people understanding the topic, that was influenced by the exhibition being clear, it being intuitive to follow, and it being relevant. So again, we're looking at the different types of qualities. So we can see there's a real difference for different outcomes and really picking up the nuance of this. And then again, another key thing for us was that people wanted to change their behaviour, and people said that that correlated really strongly with people finding the exhibition impactful, empowering and inspiring, and that really speaks to that kind of motivation for changing behaviour. So again, we can really see how the mechanisms of the visitor experience are working in this, and what influences of the exhibition are really having on visitors to quite a nuanced level.
So in this slide, we just kind of wanted to summarise the evaluation results and how they sit alongside the framework. So we won't go into it in too much detail because we kind of run through the results. But you can essentially see how, for Meet the Future, the features were that it was information-based, lots of science and facts and statistics, and really strong visuals. And you can see how these are then seen to influence the character of the exhibition. So for Meet the Future, the character was that it was informative, relevant, and empowering. You can then see, moving over to the right, that how visitor situation affects those perceptions. So for Meet the Future, gender was a key factor, and also visitor diet is a very personal topic, and so that was a key factor in what influenced people's experience of the exhibition. And then all of this comes over and kind of results in the total visitor outcome. So for Meet the Future, this was that people felt informed and they felt empowered to change their behaviour. So it's worth us saying that this is a kind of retrospective assessment of the exhibition using the evaluation that we've collected, but it shows how an exhibition kind of comes together for a visitor and what the most importants are that inform visitor outcomes. We've also now given a handout out as well, so hopefully some of you have got it, but again, as Ellie said, you can download it on the website if not. So this is our kind of handout for developing exhibitions within the framework. So it's very much a starting point, it's top level, but it helps you to kind of plot out an exhibition via the framework before heading into that kind of further detail and development. And we are actually currently using this approach in our next exhibition, which opens next year. So the exhibition is going to be looking at the history of the Earth and how Earth and life are interconnected. So we're really embedding this process into our thinking, into our interpretation plan and audience consultation as well. And I'm just going to really quickly run you through that process. So essentially the process starts by starting at the output end of the diagram. So thinking about what your key aims are, what do you want visitors to get out of the exhibition, what do you want them to know, to feel, to do. You then move over and work backwards into the kind of character and hedonic qualities of the exhibition. So what is this experience that you want visitors to have? You then move into the features, so what are the star objects that you're going to be using, how is the design going to look, and how can it be made interactive? And then the final consideration, step 4, is the kind of physical space of the exhibition. So what room do you have, how are people going to move around those space, are there any accessibility issues, really thinking through those practicalities of your exhibition space.
And then finally, based on the evaluation that we've conducted and that hopefully you'll conduct in the future, we start to kind of look at what we've just plotted out in terms of that exhibition development and really think about how that works from previous evaluation that we know and then kind of iterative visitor evaluation that we would do through the exhibition. So what essentially we're doing is we're assessing each of those decisions that we've made on each of the different sections of the exhibition and really seeing whether will those features that you've picked out, do they translate into the qualities that you want, and what does prior evaluation tell you about this and tell you about your visitors? And then again, what do the qualities, do they promote the outcomes that you're looking for? Is there a really clear line? Also then, what do you know about your visitors already? Do you know what their subject level is on a particular topic? How do you pitch it? What is the age group you're looking at? All those different things, and really understanding and kind of judging and kind of predicting what the visitor behaviour will be and really kind of changing your ideas based on that and making sure that they all fit together. So I think the important thing about this is that the use of these standardized methods for evaluation, if you've seen the kind of what we talked about today, and if you see the handout, they don't really reference the specific exhibit that we looked at this on. And we have done this on three exhibits across the museum, and they're all very, very different. And it's because it's of that standardized method is that we can build up that iterative knowledge about the visitor mechanisms of the visitor experience. So for example, with our next exhibition that Natasha mentioned, it's a similar topic in terms of kind of environmental impact and looking at kind of Earth and things like that. But on this occasion, we've made a decision not to go down the kind of informative, really information evidence-based that we went down with Meet the Future, but rather do something more kind kind of experiential and really promote wonder and fascination and admiration for the work, for the earth, rather than that evidence-based, really strong led. So in consideration of that and thinking about our features and what we want things to be, we've kind of toned down the information on kind of the human impact on the environment, and we've really created a bit more distance so that people feel really fascinated about things rather than making it feel really relevant to their lives. So we're changing those features to promote different qualities, even though it's a similar thing. So kind of leaving on a final thought, in terms of you guys taking this away, hopefully, and it being useful to you, is that you do have the ability to create whatever you like with this, and there is no right or wrong answer on those word pairs or on what you want your exhibition to be. But it's all about developing that exhibition on a framework and then evaluating it on the same framework. So essentially what you're measuring your success on is all about whether visitors gained the parameters that you set for yourself. So if you've decided that you want it to be a certain way, if visitors pick up on that and say it is that certain way, then that is probably the success rather than anything external or anything to do with visitor numbers or anything like that. So that's our kind of final point for you, and we'll just head on to some questions. So thank you. Good.
That was great. Thank you, Ellie and Natasha. So if you have a question, anything you'd like to ask, please just raise your hand and I'll pass over the mic. Our first one here.
Oh, God.
Hello there. I was interested in how you decided which of your influencing factors you would include. So we've got gender and age group and a couple of others, but there's a whole range of things that you could have chosen.
In terms of on the survey?
Yes, in terms of on the survey and what you're looking to
Yeah,
get.
I think you're right. I think there is a range. I found with this, and that there is an absolute endless range, and we can't fit it on the survey, otherwise the survey would be 20 pages long. I think one of the things that I found is that if a visitor feels it to be relevant when they kind of talk to you in that interview stage, they would bring it up. So we didn't ask specifically for Meet the Future, even though it was really important, about visitor diet. But that came out as a really important thing because people would consistently say, oh, well, I'm a vegan, so I don't need to make a difference, or things like that. So if they're making that connection and their prior experiences, if they see them important, they usually mention them. But you are right, we chose those ones as a kind of little guidance, but obviously, yeah, we could have chosen others, but those felt like a really a good basis to start with, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I suppose my question would be, the survey itself is quite a high intellectual reading level. Did you find challenges with people either with learning difficulties or English as a second language who found the sort of use of some of the words quite challenging?
A little bit, not massively. In terms of the surveys, they were done kind of with the surveyor there, so they weren't just kind of left. So there were a few questions of kind of clarification, but it was very much about allowing the visitor to interpret that term in whatever way they wanted. So there was some variation, but for the most part, a lot of people did pick it up. Okay, yeah.
Hi, so I was just wondering, in the process to incorporate the findings into future exhibitions, did you ever come across any conflict from the curatorial teams in terms of what your findings showed versus what perhaps they thought they showed? And how you resolved that conflict with news they didn't necessarily want to hear?
Not massively, and I guess that's because we're kind of the curatorial team, so we get to pick. So not massively, but it is really important when you come to those difficult decisions of kind of evidence-based decision making. It's a really good thing to have. Well, the visitors say this, and so that kind of carries a little bit of weight. But no, we haven't come across too much kind of issues in that area as of yet. But yeah, I guess that was something we would come across eventually. Yeah.
Really? Is there a button? No. Hi, just a quick question. You mentioned that we could find more information online. Is there a link to where that is?
Not as of yet, because we were told 5 minutes before we started. Yeah, but also we've got our emails, so if you do want any more information, do email us, and we can send you the handouts that we've sent around.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that the talks will be uploaded onto the Museum and Heritage Show's website, so you can download them later on.
So Meet the Future obviously has a lot of controversy, elicits a lot of emotion from the topic area it's going into. But the next exhibition you're doing is a little bit more content and could be considered quite staid in that same sense. So I'm just wondering, first of all, how you might adapt away maybe from a more emotional model when you're developing that next exhibition, because you may not elicit those types of emotions in visitors. And then also on top of that, I was wondering about exhibitions that may have a learning outcome that is more skills focused, and how that might be adapted into the model.
I think with Meet the Future, even though it's an emotional topic, I guess we kind of specifically didn't want it to be too emotional. So we did try to promote more of the evidence-based research and things, but there is that connection with the emotion stuff. So we've done the evaluation on different exhibits around the museum as well. So, and that's things like traditional glass case displays. So we've kind of found that the more evaluation pieces we do, the more knowledge we build up. But I think it's an interesting point in terms of kind of skills-based. That is something that we've kind of not necessarily considered as of yet for us. Yeah, it's a really good consideration. So.
I'm just wondering, when you're collecting data, like what proportion of people had like sensory impairments or disabilities, and how did you communicate with those audiences if they were less able to kind of use a tip box or communicate vocally through interviews?
Yeah, that wasn't something that I came across. I think I had one person who I met whose English was not great, and it was clear that they weren't able to kind of take part, unfortunately. But that wasn't something that we'd come across, but that is a kind of consideration for the future in terms of really integrating the evaluation and making it as good as it can be, because this was really kind of a pilot with pieces of paper and pencils and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely a consideration.
Are there any more questions? I think that's it. So if we can just say thank you to Ellie and Natasha again. Thank you very much. Really interesting.
Thank you. Well done.
Good.
You did the questions really well.
Oh, good.